Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Film Roundtable, a new show where me and a few young film enthusiasts sit down and discuss various topics in the film world. We talk about anything from movie reviews to film news making headlines. So today in the roundtable, we will be discussing a very prominent figure in the modern film world, writer, director, and producer Christopher Nolan. I have a set of questions to inspire lively conversation between my guest and I revolving around Mr. Nolan's career and how COVID has affected his most recent film release, Tenet. All right, let's jump right into the guest intros. So, from my bad, from the lovely suburb of Glenview, Illinois, we have Alessandro Berto, an avid fan of film, and he even has produced and written some of his own very short films. Here we go. Hello, Alessandro. How you doing today?
Hi, John. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Glad to have you. All right. And our next guest from the great city of Chicago, we have Stephen Clare, a fan of Christopher Nolan's and film in general, and he has held multiple positions on various film sets as well. All right, let's get Steve in here. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
Good. How are you guys?
Very, very good. All right. And now time for our final guest. Coming in from Syracuse, New York, we have Clayton Horowitz. He's finishing up his final year at the great Syracuse University. Clayton is a writer and director who has written and directed multiple short films and even has some awards under his belt. Let's get Clayton in here. Hello, Clayton. How are you?
What's up, guys? I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It is absolutely amazing to have all of you here today, and I'm very excited for this great conversation that we are about to have. So let us jump right in then. So like I said, I have a set of questions to spark a very interesting conversation about the great Mr. Christopher Nolan, and all of us, we've seen multiple films in theaters of Nolan's together at some point. I know Clayton is still waiting to see Tenet because like LA, like here out in LA, theaters are still not fully open out in New York. But yeah, so we'll jump right in with the very first question. And how it's going to go down is we have about 7 minutes, two parts. Each are going to be about 7 minutes for two questions, and we'll go to a commercial break and then get into the second part. So you guys ready?
Yep, sounds good.
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
Beautiful. All right. So I'd like to start off by discussing Nolan's film career as a whole. He's had a very, I'd like to say, successful career in the film world. And I'd like to go around with each of you and ask what your favorite Nolan film is and why. So we'll start with Alessandro, then we'll go to Steve, and finally Clayton. So Alessandro, if you want to take it away.
Great. Yep. So I'd have to say that Inception is my favorite Nolan film out there, just because it was the one that made me uh, watch the film multiple times and got interested in it. Plus, I'm a huge Leonardo DiCaprio fan, so there were those factors.
All right, cool, cool. Steve, if you'd like to share.
I'd say my favorite movie that I've seen from the Christopher Nolan made was Interstellar. I've always loved the idea of space travel, space exploration. And I think the entire setting of that movie does a really good job of showing what kind of problems and what kind of things you'd experience in that kind of scenario. Um, they also, I think, do a really good job of explaining the science of the film. For example, like relativity. I think it's a pretty complex idea, but they do a very good job of explaining how it works and how it affects, or like the effects of it on the characters. And so I think it's really cool how the film can do and show that kind of thing. And it also, the last thing I would say is it really shows the connection between humans and emotion and motivations for choices and actions throughout people's lives. So I think it does a really good job of explaining a lot of different aspects of. I feel like I can relate to a lot of the main characters, even though the setting is something I would never be in. So I think it's a really cool movie.
No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I think one thing I've always respected about Christopher Nolan is, like you said, his accuracy, especially with Interstellar. He brought on physicists. So, no, I definitely agree. That was his attention to detail in that aspect is very sharp. But yeah. All right, Clayton.
All right, all good answers. This is a tough question because he's made a lot of good movies, but if I had to pick my favorite, it would probably have to be The Dark Knight. I think that it was just a really impressive feat for him to take a character and a bunch of like a group of characters that we've seen so many times and have been done so many times and really invent and subvert all these like things that we were used to seeing with these characters and really turn on his head. You know, he really like made it his mission to like take this franchise and this character that everyone already knows about and really make it his own, which I don't think I've really seen a whole lot of superhero movies ever do that. Even like since then, I think that might still be one of the greatest examples of that. And he really set a precedent for superhero movies to come. And just like the way that he handles working with like big companies and big franchises that already have all these things attached to it. So I would have to say The Dark Knight.
No, I mean, what he did with that whole trilogy, it's
Mhm.
just, it's not, doesn't feel like Avengers. It doesn't feel like any other superhero movie. So yeah, I agree. It's definitely something unique and new. But yeah, those are great answers. For me, I'd have to say personally, my favorite would be, I'd have to agree with Alessandro, Inception. Just the way that he told the story and everything, and kind of like touching what Steve talked about, the physics of it and the interesting of just how he approached that whole concept was just absolutely mind blowing. And the way he crafted that film was absolutely great. Tenet, we won't get too much into it because Clayton still has to see it, so no
Yeah,
spoilers.
please spare
That's
me.
that's definitely a second for me. If I had to say, it'd go Inception, Tenet, and then Interstellar. But yeah.
Mm.
All right, so we'll get into the final question in this half of the round table. So Nolan has had a tremendous success since his directorial debut, excuse me, Memento. I don't know if all of you've seen it. That was actually one of the first films I was exposed to for Christopher Nolan. Great film, highly recommend for especially for our viewers who are watching if you have not seen that. But in your personal opinions, what has he done in his films and his career to lead to this phenomenal success? We will start with Mr. Steven.
For me personally, I would say the combination of original movies that he is able to make that is so available to widespread audiences. Any movie that comes out, I'm always going to want to see it just because it's Christopher Nolan and he always makes really solid movies with original ideas. And I think he also, again, I know I mentioned this earlier, but the complexities of a lot of these films, Interstellar has a lot of time manipulation, and Inception does something similar where we're watching three different stories at the same time, happening at different time frames. Like one's like a minute long, one's 20 minutes long, is that kind of thing. So the fact that he's able to film those kind of sequences in a way that I completely understand it as a audience member or viewer is always really impressive, I think. I would also say just the rewatchability of these films, just going back and seeing new things every time I watch it, or seeing how things lead up to other events, has been so cool. I can watch Christopher Nolan movies multiple times, just catch something new every time. And the final thing I would say is the world building. Whenever a film is over, I always just want to see more of that film. I want to see more stories on a universe, but I never can. It's always wanting more. So I always think it's impressive that he's able to create stories to that extent. That in 2 hours, I only want to just learn more about this world. So that's my answer.
No, for sure. I would definitely have to agree with that. His story building in all of his films has been absolutely phenomenal. I'd like to just open it up to you two instead of just pinpointing. So whoever would like to, Alessandro, Clayton, open it up to discussion.
Okay. I mean, I can go going off of what Steve said about his originality. I think that he's one of like the very. I mean, also it helps that he hasn't really made like a quote unquote bad movie, but I think just his handling of original ideas and kind of like how versatile he is with his subject matter. He's made going from like the Batman franchise to something like Dunkirk, which was much more grounded and realistic, to going to things like Tenet and Inception that are like complete like mind bogglers. Like he's really shown that he can direct anything and he can tell the best version of like any story that he's allowed to. And I think that like having that kind of reputation is a great way to get people to come watch your movies. And he's really one of the only directors I can think of that like is producing like only original content, and people still go to see it, because a lot of the issues that I feel like original movies have nowadays is that, you know, they don't have the kind of backing behind it to get people to come out and see it unless there's some famous actors in it or something. But like with Christopher Nolan, he can really make whatever he wants, and you can trust that it'll be fresh, it'll be original, and people will still go.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely. Sorry, Alessandro.
No, that's okay, John. I'll go after you.
No, I mean we are running out of time for this segment, so I'd like to hear your thoughts actually.
Yep, I'll wrap it up quickly then, just adding in what the other guys have said, that he's one of the few directors who can have his cake and eat it too, in the sense that it has this mass appeal, but also really pushes the boundaries on the audience's intellect and attention span. And he really makes us watch these movies much more attentively and pay attention to it much more than a Marvel movie or anything like that. So I think that's something really important he does, is he's able to have these complex films, but also have a large target audience who wants to watch them, which is very uncommon, but he does it very well.
Oh, for sure, all great answers. You know, I agree with what all of you guys are talking about. You know, like Steve talking about the story building, Alessandro Clayton touching on the whole fact that he could have these complex stories, but still have a large target audience where people go and pay to enjoy it. So yeah. So we are out of time for this first segment. So we are going to take a short minute break and look at a quick commercial. Take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back. Just gotta figure out how to do that.
Mike's bring me in.
You really want to know?
He can communicate with the future.
Time travel.
No. Inversion.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones too.
As I understand it, we're trying to prevent World War III.
Nuclear holocaust. Well, I've seen too much. Well, we'll try and keep up. I'm not saying Armageddon here.
There are people in the future who need us.
This is where our worlds collide.
How would you like to die?
Oh.
Your duty transcends national interest. This is about survival.
Doesn't us being here now mean it never happened?
And we are back. That was, a quick trailer for in kind with what we were discussing, Tenet. Again, great film. Clayton still has to see it, but all of our viewers, if you have not, I know it's difficult, but definitely check it out. But we are back, so let's jump right back into the next segment. So, first question in this next segment is, I feel it is very fair, and I feel like you guys can agree with me, to say that every, or if not all, filmmakers has their own style or common elements that they constantly recall to and utilize throughout their careers. So if you guys would have to pinpoint Nolan's style or elements that he constantly calls back to through his films, what would they be? And we will start with Mr. Horowitz.
All right. I mean, I guess the things that he does that stands out to me the most, I think it's kind of his like unconventional narrative structures and his like interesting perspectives on like, existentialism and stuff like that. Like he's very good at like slowly experimenting with things. He's never made anything that was like so insane or crazy that like people weren't able to comprehend it and follow along, but he's still in every movie is like pushing the limits of what people thought he could do. He's never really like taken a film off or like made one that like was either like made one that was like for like money or for like fans to enjoy or anything specific. Like he really hones in on the things that interest him and like really and tries to push those limits, and it always turns out great. Like he's clearly working with things like themes and ideas and concepts that like he really believes in, he really loves, and you can tell, you can see it by like how hard he works to make sure that no matter what things he's experimenting with, that it still comes across to the audience no matter what. I just think he's really great with trying new things and succeeding.
No, for sure. I definitely would have to agree with that. Steve, have any thoughts?
First of all, I do completely agree with Clayton. I think he does a really good job of introducing these stories, like I've mentioned earlier, and bring them to an audience where you really understand what's happening. At least by the end of the film, maybe not during any sequence, but by the end of the film, you're like, oh, that makes sense. I would say a personal thing that I've noticed in a lot of Nolan movies that I think is always really cool is usually like time manipulation or his use of like a crosscut, I would say. Interstellar, Inception, both we see a difference in storytelling in terms of time. Like again, one's happening over 20 years, one's happening over a couple hours. And the fact that I don't feel taken out of the story in that way. I'm always understanding what's happening. Is always something I think one of his strengths. As well as in Dunkirk, the entire film is just 3 different stories over different time periods. So I think his using time as a storytelling device is one of the things I think really makes him stand out, and that really shows his style, like the style he kind of uses.
Yeah, for sure. Alessandro?
So I also think one of the things is score and how the soundtrack works with what's going on in the movie or the film. I always thought that was one of the most underappreciated. Not underappreciated, it's recognized the way that they complement what's going on the screen versus what you're hearing. But I think I personally really enjoy just listening in on what Nolan's doing or what he's creating as much as what's on the picture. And of course, I mean, that's not Nolan entirely. There's, an entire orchestra and composer that's going on behind that. But the execution of it, I think, is where he does get some credit. And I think that's always interesting.
No, that's definitely an interesting point. If I'm being completely honest, when I've thought about elements and themes that he used music, though I could see that I agree he has constant and interesting musical style when it comes to the composition. It's interesting that you raise that point, because if I'm being completely honest, I've never really, though I've thoroughly enjoyed Hans Zimmer and the other composers, Ludwig. I can't. It's the guy who does The Mandalorian now. The guy who just did Tenet. Great compositions, but
Ludwig
Göransson or something.
yeah.
Yeah, he's great. But no, that's a really interesting point, Alessandro. I never really considered that. But yeah. So we're gonna move on to our final question. A little bit of a loaded one, so we'll have fun with this question.
Oh boy.
Finally, Nolan's latest film Tenet was released during quarantine, as we all know, leaving many to have to wait to see it when it comes, to digital release or DVD, even if people buy DVDs anymore. And Clayton, unfortunately, you are in that crowd who has not seen it yet due to the quarantine. Do you think that it was wise for him to push furthest release during quarantine, or should he have waited like many other films nowadays are doing till theaters were allowed to open all over the country? And we'll go back to Alessandro for this to start us off.
So I think somebody had to do it, and it had to be a big blockbuster movie to get a gauge of how audiences will react or go to the theater. So somebody had to do it, number one, and it had to be a well-recognized director. And it almost would be un-Nolan to release it when the pandemic's over, because he takes risks in the film, and we appreciate him for that. So almost in and of itself, him releasing it before any other directors or any other studios are releasing their films, it's almost part of his personality to do that and to take that risk and see if there's a certain return to it. Now, we could go over the figures of it actually worked or not. I'm not sure about it, but somebody had to do it, and he was the right person to do it. And it's almost part of his character to take risks and see what happens.
So interesting, that really quickly to interject that you brought up, like the numbers and if it actually worked. It's interesting to look at the numbers. I was looking at them last night. I can't remember the exact figures, but internationally, or just I guess like just internationally, it did pretty well. But sadly, in the United States, obviously, I think it only grossed. I think the number was 55 million. I could be off, something like that. So you could argue worldwide in the total it worked, but domestically, definitely not. So let's once Clayton or Steve, I'll open up to you guys now.
I can go.
No,
go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll go with Clayton. Clayton, you jump. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, wait your turn. I mean, I agree with everything Alessandro said. I think if anyone was going to do it, it was him. I think no other movie would have had the quote unquote success that his movie did because of all the things we mentioned before about how esteemed he is. I also think that he really didn't have a whole lot of other great options for releasing it. It was either put it on a streaming service, which he was completely against, which I get, or I guess push it back another year or two. But all these other blockbusters have already been pushed back a year or two. Like there's going to be so much box office competition, and like with award season 2, like I don't necessarily know if it was the best choice, but I can see why he did it because none of the other choices are really that much more plausible, especially when you have like a vision and ideas like he does about making sure you see things in theaters on like a big screen and like 70 millimeter stuff like that. So I can definitely see like why that's the choice that he made because he's not necessarily in it for the box office either. He's clearly already made more than enough that he needs. It's not about that for him. I think just the one thing that he lost that he would have gained in the other ways is just the audience. I'm an avid Nolan fan. I still haven't seen it for reasons just like that. So I think the only thing that he personally is losing from this is just being able to have everyone who should see it be able to see it. But when everyone in the world has kind of had to make sacrifices over the past few months, year, stuff like however long it's been. So I understand. I can see why he did what he did.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So we are running out of time right now. So Steve, if you could give us your quick, brief thoughts on this.
I completely agree with both what John and or Alessandro and Clayton have said. I think financially it wasn't the best idea just because I don't think Warner Brothers is going to get their full refund on that movie. But what I would say is that Christopher Nolan doesn't make movies for money. I think he's making it to tell a story, and I think he was going to release this no matter what. And I think that this really shows that he is caring more about telling a story than really making money. So I think that's the main reason why it's a good thing that he released it when he did.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to we're just in unprecedented times right now with quarantine and COVID. So, but it is interesting that he pushed for it. And, for me, Alessandro and Steve, we actually all saw it. It's not together, but we all saw it at one point together. I saw it with Alessandro, then I saw it with Steve because I just loved it. I want to see it twice. But yeah, it's just, I hope that maybe he'll do a re-release when theaters open up, but we'll see. And we are just about out of time, so I just want to take the time and thank all three of you for being here. It's funny because we're literally all in different time zone. Clayton in New York, you guys in Illinois, me all the way here in LA. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your schedules to discuss this and this was an amazing conversation. I enjoyed every bit of it. So I will bid you guys farewell and thank you very much for doing this.
Of course, John, anytime.
Right,
Thanks for having us.
Anytime. All right, and that is all the time we have today for the Film Roundtable. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and maybe we will do this again, and hopefully then you will all tune in. So thank you and have a great day.